The church community is split over a contentious issue that Prophet Brian Carn recently sparked. Some have praised his honesty for his audacious remarks regarding the role of pastors, while others have questioned his authority. In this video, we dissect Prophet Brian Carn's remarks regarding pastors and explain why they are so controversial. You'll discover the complete background of his remarks, the responses of church officials and members, and the startling facts that most people don't discuss. It becomes unexpected at this point. Some of his assertions went against established notions of church leadership. The remarks made by Prophet Brian Carn during a recent sermon sparked the uproar and swiftly went viral on the internet. His words weren't particularly startling on their own, but the manner he phrased them, questioning the conventional norms for pastors, attracted attention right away. Carn claimed that the function of pastors is sometimes misinterpreted and that some leaders prioritize appearances or self-interest over their actual spiritual goal, according to numerous reports and videos that have gone viral on social media. Brian Carn's supporters claim that he was only being straightforward, slicing through the clutter and bringing to light realities that many churchgoers observe but infrequently bring up in public. However, his remarks were viewed by some as aggressive and even demeaning to other ministers. Opinions were circulating in church group chats, forums, and comment sections within hours. Carn's honesty was hailed by some as a wake-up call for church leadership. Some wondered if a prophet should so openly and directly criticize his contemporaries. It matters what the setting is. A well-known voice in the religious community, Brian Carn is renowned for fusing contemporary commentary with spiritual teaching. His supporters are used to his audacious approach, which frequently challenges conventions and provokes discussion. However, because it directly questions the authority structures that many congregations take for granted, the topic of pastors' roles struck a chord this time. Snippets of his lecture started making the rounds on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube, even before the dispute reached its full intensity. People debated the subtleties of his remarks, breaking down his statements line by line. While some films focused on his critique of leadership tactics, others stressed the spiritual guidance component. The end effect was a blend of great curiosity, skepticism, and admiration, just the sort of interaction that makes a conversation go viral. But everything changes at this point. The discussion spread beyond his fans as the videos went viral. The topic expanded to include expectations for church leaders, pastors' duties, and accountability. At that point, the argument really got heated. The responses from congregations and church officials were swift and diverse after Prophet Brian Carn's words started making the rounds. His sermon was publicly praised by some pastors, who said it brought attention to a crucial truth. In the church, leadership involves more than just titles, looks, or power. It's about accountability, direction, and providing honest service to the congregation. These leaders praised Carn for bringing attention to matters that are frequently left unsaid and for inspiring spiritual leaders to consider their roles. However, some churchgoers and preachers were critical. They contended that Carn's speech might be interpreted as combative, leading to needless friction amongst ministers. Questioning other pastors in such a public setting, according to some leaders, runs the risk of destroying church unity. These worries were mirrored in comments on church forums and social media, where discussions ranged from the practical to the theological. While some members felt it was long overdue for someone to openly address these concerns, others were concerned that such pronouncements may leave churchgoers unsure of whom to trust. Reactions inside congregations were equally divided. Many of Carn's supporters related tales of pastors they had observed prioritizing material gain, social standing, or self-interest over their spiritual purpose. Carn's remarks felt affirming to many members, as though someone was finally expressing the reality they had been silently witnessing for years. But for others, it was uneasy. They questioned whether openly questioning the duties of pastors could drive a wedge between their communities instead of fostering progress. These reactions were greatly amplified via social media. Short snippets of Carn's sermon were discussed on church news Instagram accounts, YouTube comment sections, and Twitter threads. People argued over which of his points were true, which were debatable, and if the discussion would actually result in a change in the way pastors lead. As viewers from beyond his immediate flock joined the conversation, engagement soared, and hashtags pertaining to Ka and the pastor's accountability started trending. Several commentators and influencers with a religious background added fuel to the fire by posing challenging queries such as, should pastors be held more accountable to their congregations, and how much transparency is required in spiritual leadership. They investigated the ramifications of Ka's remarks for the larger church community, broadening the discussion and transforming a single sermon clip into a more thorough investigation of morality, standards, and leadership in contemporary ministry. However, the discussion spread beyond the internet. Some church boards and leadership councils reportedly started having private talks in reaction to Ka's remarks. Although these sessions were private, insiders disclosed that leaders were evaluating their own methods and speculating about how congregations may react if more clergy members voiced their opinions in a similar way. There was no denying the rippling effect. Across several congregations, a single sermon had generated discussions in leadership offices, living rooms, and internet forums, and a fresh ingredient appeared just when it appeared that the reactions would begin to level off. Brian Ka's own answer, which clarified and emphasized his remarks, rekindled the conversation on a much larger scale. Prophet Brian Ka came forth to address both his followers and detractors and to explain his message as the controversy around his sermon grew more heated. Because the first tapes had been extensively circulated, often out of context, leading to misunderstandings regarding his intentions, his subsequent declarations were essential. Ka made it clear that he never intended to personally disparage other pastors, but rather to start a meaningful discussion about responsibility, meaning, and the actual function of spiritual leadership. He reminded the audience that a pastor's job is a sacred one, based on serving others, being humble, and leading congregations in accordance with God's will. Ka claims that some leaders deviate from their calling because of pressures, diversions, or social expectations rather than because they mean to. He emphasized that in order for the church to flourish and for congregations to receive genuine guidance, it is imperative that these difficulties be brought to light. In his explanation, Ka touched on a few important topics. He began by emphasizing the distinction between influence and authority. Having a title or attracting attention is not what it means to be a pastor. It's about encouraging spiritual development, openness, and mentoring. According to Ka, the influence of the church is lessened and member confidence may even be damaged when leaders put their own interests, prestige, or reputation ahead of serving others. He then talked about accountability. Ka maintained that in addition to teaching morality and ethics, pastors also need to live them out. Leaders are expected by their congregations to set an example of conduct that embodies spiritual principles. Confusion and faith are weakened when words and deeds are inconsistent. Ka want to inspire pastors to examine their methods and reaffirm their commitment to genuine leadership by bringing up this issue in public. Third, he reaffirmed the value of candid communication inside the church. Wa didn't intend for his remarks to cause conflict. Instead, they served as a call to encourage candid discussions, mentoring, and remedial action when required. He exhorted churchgoers to interact politely, support leaders, and ask questions in a way that encourages accountability without encouraging criticism or rumors. These explanations had a significant impact. Some detractors changed their minds, admitting that Ka's message was a more general critique of leadership ethics rather than a personal one. His supporters felt validated that Ka was tackling a problem they had long seen, while initially doubtful congregation members learned more about his goals. Concurrently, the clarification sparked new discussions on social media. Videos of Ka describing his viewpoint went viral and sparked further research. His message's subtleties were examined by commentators, who also discussed what true leadership is and how congregations should react when they believe that leadership is not in line with spiritual principles. Many spectators praised his straightforward style, pointing out that it strengthened the discussion's gravity and gave him more credibility. However, this was also the moment when things changed. The discussion grew beyond specific churches to a broader cultural and spiritual discussion as more people responded to Ka's remarks. Concerns over pastoral leadership's future in the contemporary era started to surface. Should churches call for greater openness? Can systemic transformation be influenced by prophetic voices like K.S.? What does this indicate for the upcoming generation of church leaders? Maybe most importantly, this prepared the ground for a more thorough investigation and the wider ramifications of Ka's remarks on public opinion, leadership styles, and the church community. A discussion that extends well beyond a single sermon has been triggered by Prophet Brian K's remarks on pastors. The demands that are being placed on spiritual leaders and the basic basis of church leadership accountability are now discussed. We must examine a few crucial areas in order to comprehend the wider ramifications: openness, honesty, and how pastors' roles are changing in a connected, social media-driven world. First, openness is now a crucial requirement. Today's congregations are curious about their pastors' daily lives in addition to their sermons. Nowadays, the church is more than just a place where sermons are given. It is a community that engages in online communication, exchanges narratives, and publicly holds leaders responsible. Ka's statement draws attention to an increasing need. Leaders need to be open and honest in both their words and deeds. Any perceived contradiction can swiftly undermine trust in front of observing congregations. Second, this discussion revolves around integrity. Pastors are prompted to consider their reasons in great detail by Ka's emphasis on true leadership. Are they driven by wealth, status, or recognition from others, or are they leading to inspire and serve? A spiritual leader runs the risk of alienating members and having a negative impact on the entire church community when they put their own interests ahead of the development of their congregation. Ka's audacity serves as a reminder to followers and leaders alike that honesty is a must. It is the cornerstone that spiritual leadership has to be built upon. Third, pastors' roles are changing. Church leaders are required to manage a variety of platforms in today's connected society, including social media, podcasts, online ministries, and in-person preaching. This increase in power brings with it both scrutiny and opportunity. The remarks made by Prophet Brian K. highlight the necessity for leaders to accept accountability in all spheres in which they are present. Today's pastor is more than just a pulpit preacher. Every move they take as a public person has the potential to motivate or spark conversation. There are even more ramifications for mentoring and the growth of future leaders. According to Ka, peer support groups, mentorship programs, and accountability frameworks can be required to uphold a high standard of leadership. Leaders can establish a new standard for what it means to lead a congregation in the modern world if they are prepared to examine themselves, take constructive criticism, and have open discussions. Additionally, the discussion that Ka's sermon sparked inspires members of the congregation to become more involved in their church communities. Members are being encouraged to observe, inquire about, and participate in leadership techniques rather than only passively attending services. A healthier, more responsible church setting where candid communication and respect for one another promote spiritual development can be created by this change in the relationship between the pastor and the congregation. These ramifications are also significantly influenced by social media amplification. The ease with which a sermon can reach a worldwide audience is demonstrated by the rapidity with which K's message spread. Pastors and churches now have to think about how their public personas, doctrines, and behaviors are seen outside of their own walls. Public opinion and trust can be impacted by a single statement, social media post, or sermon clip that sparks extensive discussion, debate, and even scandal. Lastly, Ka's remarks emphasize how crucial bravery is to effective leadership. It is difficult to confront painful realities, speak truth to power, and challenge the current quo. However, as this discussion demonstrates, prophetic voices have the power to spark reform, encourage introspection, and motivate leaders and followers to aim higher. However, another intriguing layer appears just as the leadership implications become more apparent: the debate's effects on the larger religious community, both online and off. What reactions are regular churchgoers, influencers, and congregations having to this conversation, and what might it signify for the overall future of ministry? The remarks made by Prophet Brian Carn regarding pastors sparked discussion among church leaders as well. They struck a profound chord with congregations, both domestically and abroad. A lot of people in the religious world started thinking back on their own encounters with pastors, spiritual leaders, and church organizations. It was validating for some. Others began to wonder and even mistrust it. Congregants who had long been unsure about the leadership in their churches accounted for a sizable share of the replies. People shared stories about instances in which they saw a pastor's teachings and behavior not aligning on social media and in online forums. People were prompt to speak up about issues that had previously been kept quiet by Kay's sermon. Remarks ranged from gratitude. At last, someone is telling cautious curiosity the truth. It's getting me to think, but I'm not sure whether I agree. Discussions in small groups, Bible study circles, and community gatherings were also affected. Some congregations used Ka's remarks as a starting point for introspection on responsibility, mentoring, and moral leadership in private conversations. Members discussed how to strike a balance between the need to hold leaders responsible for their actions and respect for church authority. Although these discussions weren't always pleasant, they were fruitful in that they made congregations reevaluate the fundamental principles and expectations they had of their pastors. The empowerment of churchgoers is another crucial element. Congregants were reminded by Ka's remarks that their opinions count in determining the expectations and ethos of a church. Members were urged to actively participate in creating a spiritually healthy environment, raise questions, and seek transparency rather than obediently accepting leadership decisions. Though minor, this change in viewpoint is significant. It transforms the pastor-congregation relationship from a one-sided hierarchy to one that emphasizes communication and accountability. This empowerment was heightened by social media. Videos of excerpts from Ka's sermons went viral, generating thousands of shares, comments, and conversations. His remarks were examined by bloggers, YouTubers, and faith-based influencers who produced content that reached congregation members who might not have otherwise heard the sermon. Online discussions arose regarding the qualities of a successful pastor, the proper distribution of authority and accountability, and the ways in which congregations might guarantee that pastors remain faithful to their vocation. The impact, however, wasn't totally seamless. The discussion brought up difficult trust issues for a few members of the congregation. How do you balance having a great deal of respect for a spiritual leader with acknowledging that pastors are human, just like everyone else? How can congregations deal with ineffective leadership without dividing them? These inquiries are a component of the continuous dialogue surrounding K's remarks. Sparked. However, there were also inspiring and hopeful moments. There were reports of pastors who embraced his teachings, reflected on themselves, and even started changing their leadership styles. Congregations noted a renewed emphasis on accountability, openness, and mentoring. These noticeable improvements highlight how beneficial Ka's message can be. Debate and controversy aren't the only topics. It concerns the impact on spiritual communities in the physical world. Lastly, the response from the religious community brought attention to the discussion's generational component. Younger members of the congregation were more outspoken since they were frequently more at ease, sharing their thoughts online and demanding accountability. They discussed the necessity of moral leadership, the changing role of the church in society, and the expectations placed on pastors today. Ka's sermon gave senior congregation members a chance to think about how leadership needs to change with the changes, while also reflecting on established expectations. And the debate raised an even more fascinating question, just as it appeared that the discussion had peaked. Could this be the start of a change in the definition and assessment of spiritual leadership in the larger religious community? The response could influence churches' futures for years to come.